shot a lot of footage. Is there anything that you guys remember that would have been interesting if it was in the film?
Gary Zeller running through the hotel.
There's so many versions, you know, the director's cut, the extra 13 minutes, the this, that. Every frame has got to have been shown by now.
George shoots a lot of footage, but there's a lot of, I mean, George shoots a lot of reaction shots, a lot of over the shoulder. He just shoots the scene to death in terms of total coverage of a scene.
But that's not unusual in filmmaking.
Well, it's unusual to shoot as much as he does. For that,
Originally,
but I don't know
you
what
said,
about for that time. Yeah.
That movie is rich with
Director's
detail.
choice.
Rich with detail.
Yeah.
Because originally you said he had over a 3-hour cut or something.
We did.
Yeah,
That was the first thing David and I saw in New York when we went to the screening. It was a 3.5-hour cut.
What happened was
I was totally amazed. And I said, Jesus, long.
Like Knight Rider.
Yeah, right.
I think Knight Rider's Okay, remember when George was walking down the hall with the guy and saying, the guy from New York said, well, guys, this is a long script. He says, well, it seems like so detailed that we did the first cut, and it's really not that long. I mean, because he added the first half of the film on the break. Well, actually, George miscounted. It was actually, instead of being like, the first half was like an hour and a half instead of being like 45 minutes. It somehow slipped up, so it ended up being a 3-hour cut.
Yeah,
Me? Yeah, I can't remember who wrote it, but somebody said something, compared Romero to James Whale, and said that when he had to make a sequel to his classic film, he couldn't make a film as good. So he decided for the next best thing was to make a better film. So he made Dawn of the Dead. And I was curious to know when, at what point, if ever, even if it was yesterday, what point you guys might have realized that that you were involved in something that was a little different, that wasn't Friday the 13th 2, it wasn't some slasher flick.
There were no Friday.
Well, no, it was groundbreaking. That was the
I understand that.
first
Well,
one.
I'll tell you what made me realize it was, which was really not surprising, but the level of it was surprising, was the banter in the press about the movie, and the banter about the political aspects and the apocalyptic vision of the United States, and this contrast between one reviewer to another, and talking about all these things. And I went, oh my God, we're seeing things in this movie that are really surprising. I mean, when you read the script, you don't get the idea of this is what George is. But he doesn't do that on purpose, but they're interpreting all these things from the movie. That was surprising to me. Very.
I think, after the first screening, or the second screening or something, I went to a party that George gave or something on the Midtown.
Oh.
Remember that thing?
I know exactly where it was.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, and I sat down with a very beautiful young lady named Marcia McBroom, famous model at that time in New York. A few other people, friends, and they had seen it. We sat down, and a woman from the New York Times, the reviewer, sat there with a few of her friends, and she began to hold an inquisition on what are we doing with this movie, and why, what kind of atmosphere we're creating in terms of violence and that kind of thing. How do I feel about being a part of, and I looked at her and I said, it's a horror film. you know, it's a horror film. I mean, people laugh at this thing. It's a fantasy. It's not real, you know, and I think that most people who look at it are going to realize that. And they're not going to go out and slash their wives because they're watching Dawn of the Dead.
Or bite a chunk out of it.
About a chunk out of it, right. But Scott reminds me that was very intense at that point. And I was quite, you know, I was kind of stuck there with this
Well,
one.
it was also because that film had a wide release, and it was released without a rating, which was unheard of. That's right. To be a wide release, not a small independent release.
It was in every
So
theater.
the press, that actually helped.
Rather than take the X.
Yeah, we couldn't.
There was no rating at all.
We couldn't, no rating.
I knew we had something different when Jim Crutch's head came off on a helicopter blade, and the audience would applaud.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming up.
Now, we had, we opened #1 in Variety, #2 the next week, and #3 in gross numbers for a film. And it was shown in every major theater house in Manhattan. and I left Manhattan, went to Indiana, right after it was open, and it was in every drive-in theater in Indiana across the country, and I had no idea that it would get that kind of situation.
For me,
It was
like,
on 42nd Street for years.
Yeah, but I played at the Embassy and the Winter Garden.
And the Rivoli.
Whoa, I got to
And the Rivoli.
Yeah. No, I got to, wait, we got 5 seconds.
You got
Jack
as
A.
much time as
Harris.
you want.
Everyone knows
I'm
Jack
not telling the
A.
guy that's big stuff.
Jack A. Remember Jack A. Harris? She's in all the sitcoms and that kind of thing? Jack A. and I, and, oh, I can't think of the other girl's name, but she's doing a lot of stuff now. Jack A. and I were doing some off-Broadway theater projects on 42nd Street, the new theater district down there. And we were walking up Broadway, and we passed the Winter Garden Theater. And there we are, Dawn of the Dead, pictures of me all over the marquee, everywhere, that kind of thing. And Jack A's walking, she said, "Ken, you're a star. You made it. Look at you." I said, "Jack A, we're walking because we can't catch a bus to get uptown." That means nothing to me. We get our bus fare. So that's, a little bit of reality that's sunk in there. Yeah.
there was another aspect that was before the film was done, and that was that after about a week or two, as a crew member, I mean, it was my first theatrical film, and I was very young, but at the same time, everyone there seemed to be doing everything possible to make this a good film, whether they were a script, or the director, or an actor, or in hair, or special effects. An extra, I mean, even the extras went all out. I mean, we started this like November 7th, 77, and it was a warm, sunny day, 70 degrees or something. And you had all these people going out and zombieing outside of the mall. And then these crowd shots had to be continued a week later. And of course, a lot of these people were not wearing shirts, or were wearing sleeveless shirts and shorts and clothes that weren't suited for cold weather because it was warm in the middle of November. They didn't know they were coming back a week later. And it was like 30 degrees, freezing. We were wearing down coats and gloves, and they were wearing the same clothing.
There was
because
a
of
guy in the swimming
continuity.
trunks.
Right, the guy
That's what I was
was
talking about.
right, that was the beach ball man.
Amazing.
And not one of them complained.
Yeah.
No one complained. I mean, we complained about being cold occasionally,
Yeah.
long days, but
Yeah.
the creative juices from the beginning of the crew to the end, to the person, to the extras, no one complained. And there was sort of like, the whole crew kept gelling together, and there was a chemistry that got better and better and better. And I was talking with some of the folks here tonight about this. I just felt that the film was going to be an exciting horror film that was really going to be successful because of all the positive energy that was going into making a horror film. Because people were excited creatively. We were always working together. And no one, I don't think, really had a problem with each other most of the time. And I think that, generally speaking, when a whole film, when a whole crew, and everyone's working together like that, you can feel that energy going into the film that's being made. And it was at that point, the second or third week, that I felt it was going to be very successful because of what had been done previously. But this felt so much bigger. It was in color. And, I was getting to know the actors and the effects people and the sound people, and it just felt like we were all working together as a whole.
Also, it was George.
George.
You would do anything
I-
for George.
right.
And we let them understand. But another thing too is, in Pittsburgh at the time, that was the biggest picture that had ever been shot there. It was huge, I mean,
Well, the community room at the mall was twice this size.
Right.
Filled with people getting made up as zombies.
Hundreds of
So Tom
zombies
and I
every night
worked
for a
on
buck. They worked for a
George,
buck.
A couple years earlier, there was 4 people in the crew. We were all Martin.
Martin.
It was like a group of us. You acted, you picked up the equipment, and then
Right. Your mom
apples,
catered.
you wrapped cables, and things like that.
Well, it was because of this movie that when you're born and you grew up in Pittsburgh, one of your things you want to do when you grow up is to be a zombie. You want to do this movie.
It certainly inspired this 16-year-old to make a hell of a lot of calls 22 years later.
Well, for me, it was almost the first day on set. I knew I was going to be working on something that was going to be, from the moment we got there, we were reading the script, then when you just started the shooting, you knew this was going to be something, we were going to be talking about 20, 30 years, and I sort of knew it was going to be a cult.
Sure.
It was going to be a
fill the room now. So we can see what other members we pick up.
Let me say one thing, because Tom said something that's
Go
really
ahead.
important.
You're not
Said
stopping.
you do anything for George, and the reason for that is, of anyone that I've worked with, it's not just because of George Romero, but because of who he is in person, he treats everyone, no matter what you do on a film shoot, whether you're the PA or whether you're playing the lead, he treats everybody the same. Because he's a very decent, very down-to-earth, incredibly considerate person. And that's why people love him, because he doesn't have any attitude, he just wants to make it work. He wants to help you make it work.
Yeah.
It's kind of that simple. That's why he's like so great to work.
He's certainly different from most of the directors.
Very well. He's lacking in ego.
Yeah.
And
And that,
collaboration.
when I auditioned for this, I had no idea where I was going. I heard about it from Phoebe, I was working at Phoebe's at the time. Scott, to President Scott, and they said, looking for a guy, why don't you go up? I went upstairs, went through the office, Richard's office, and I see a poster of Eraserhead, and then I see a poster of Night of the Living Dead. Oh, God, that's one of my favorite movies. I have a friend that works in that. I'm still, not clicking that I'm dealing with the same people. Oh, this is great. Oh, I know this. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm telling them all, and they're all smiling because they're liking this. And I'm not putting it on because I'm genuinely impressed and don't know where the hell I am. Okay? So we started to audition that, and finally it dawned on me that I'm dealing with the same people who made Night of the Living Dead, who Dwayne Jones worked with, and it didn't take me long, guys. I'm not that slow, but it's, and that's pretty much the story between the connection between me, Dwayne Jones, and the Night of the Living Dead and Dawn. I hope I made it short enough.
Lenny, when he's talking about auditioning, I'll just give you a whole other perspective. I think it was my perspective. When I auditioned for George, I was not at all what he was thinking of for the part. He was thinking of somebody who was Nick Nolte-sized, big, urban, street, white guy. Here comes this little wiry, a military guy. That's how I played it. But the thing that came up about Kenny, who I didn't know Kenny at that time, George really liked my audition, but it was completely not the way he saw the character at all. Because I did this whole different take on it. And he told me that, it's very frank. And he said, well, I got a problem. He said, I really like what you do, but I got this problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, I'm going to cast this guy probably. He's black, he's about 6'4", and he's like twice your size. And I said, oh, okay. He said, but I'm going to call you back. This is the truth. Did I tell you this? No. Oh, no, this is true. So he called me back. I went back in again, and I auditioned for him again, and he was very enthused. And he sat there, and he said, I don't know what to do. And he said, I'm probably going to cast this other guy. And I said, it just came out of my mouth. I said, George, why don't you just forget about it? The audience is not going to care after the first 5 minutes. I'm an actor, hoping to be cast by him. It just came out of my mouth.
That's a big one.
And he was talking about Kenny the whole time, because he knew he was going to use it before he cast him. So he wanted to cast somebody who was size. So I said, well, why don't you make it like Mutt and Jeff kind of thing? He said, okay, I'll think about it. And he did.
He put me together with another group to audition. He brought me up to audition with another group, and he had another guy that played your part. And this guy was bigger.
Oh, yeah. That's what he wanted.
And the guy, it was very difficult because I'm giving orders, and he's giving orders. And I said, wait a minute, stop hurting. And we just didn't mesh as well. But when we worked together, and we auditioned together, it did work well because there was a chemistry there. The other guy was pretty much on his own. He was. Yeah. Well, he was. Here we are, and he's. Yeah.
Some things are meant to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it leads us into the next scene. It's the first time Peter and Roger meet.
Yeah, we sold it.